All right, let's jump into this. We are finishing our series, Courageous Faith, today. And we're going to talk about something that's, when I was preparing the message, I'm like, this doesn't really fit with courageous faith. But really what I came to realize is what we're going to talk about today is literally one of the greatest acts of courage you can ever undertake, with faith, believing that this works. Because we live in a world that says what Joel's going to talk about today that comes from the Word of God doesn't work. But it does work if we take it by faith, but it's a slow victory, okay? So this week, I'm on the board of directors of another organization, and this week we had a massive situation at this organization that required me to step in, and we had to make some major changes, like major changes. This involved major conflict. This involved some major relational conflict. It involved having to tell some people they've got to go, they can't stay here. We had to shuffle some people around. A bunch of feelings were involved. There was lots of emotions. And I kind of got the job of being the guy that brought the bad news, okay? Now, I don't mind bringing bad news. I mean, if you haven't noticed, I don't mind bringing bad news. This is good news we have, but I don't mind telling you the bad news because sometimes you need to know the bad news before you know the good news. Somebody asked, they said, are these changes you're making going to be good? And I'm like, well, good usually comes on the other side of uncomfortable. So yes, they will be good, but first it's going to be a little uncomfortable. But one of the things I kept hearing I was praying, I'm like, Lord, help me do this right, because here's one of my problems. I have been accused many times of being a little too intense. My wife tells me, she says, Joel, you go in with twice the intensity needed. I'll come after my daughter for something and she'll break down to tears, and my wife's like, you didn't have to come in that hot. I'm like, but if I didn't, and I'm like, and first of all, I was calm. I felt great. Everything was good. My daughter's in tears, my wife's in tears, everybody's in tears, and I'm like, I'm calm. So this is a problem of mine. I recognize this, but I kept feeling like the Lord saying, be gentle as you bring the strength to the table here. Be gentle, be gentle, be gentle. And it was hard. My dad told me one time, he said, Joel, whenever you go into a conflict situation, he said, you always need to go in like a paranoid cat, assuming there's something you don't know that's going to jump out and eat you. So you go in, you're like, he said, your problem is you go in like a lion. And he's like, sometimes it doesn't require being a lion. But he's like, here's the thing. If you go in like a paranoid cat to the situation, assuming there's something you don't know, but everything turns out to be as bad as you thought it was, you can turn into a lion later. But if you go in as a lion first, you may regret what you did afterwards. And how many of you, I've got a few of those regrets, a few thousand, where I came in with double the intensity needed. So this week, I felt like the Lord said, I need you to be gentle in handling this. And I'll be honest, it was a messy week. But on the other side of it, I would have made it a lot messier had I not gone in with gentleness. And even in my gentleness, I was accused of not being gentle. But I was being gentle, okay? So we're in this series called Courageous Faith, and we started the series talking about this truth, this reality, that life doesn't get easier. We've got to get stronger. A lot of us, we got in our mind somewhere this idea that once I get this or once I get that, life will get easier. But you come to realize that life never gets easier, but you can get stronger. And when you get stronger, it doesn't really matter how hard life is because you can handle the things that come. And we talked specifically about this, that we're not called to be strong like physically strong. We're called to be spiritually strong. But that spiritual strength often only shows up when we come to the end of our resources. We can't handle the emotional strain of something. We can't handle the psychological strain of it. We can't handle the stress of something. And we get to the point where we're like, I can't do this anymore. And I know that for a fact that some of you this morning, you're in a situation like that. You've got a crisis in your life, and you're looking at your marriage and you're going, I can't do this anymore. You're looking at a situation at work and going, I don't have the emotional capacity to do this. I don't have the psychological strength to do this. And the beauty about this weird thing that we believe as Christians is when we get to the end of our strength, that's when we can depend on the higher power, God's strength, to come in and give us what we need. And oftentimes, God will allow situations in our life that are beyond our ability to handle it so that we surrender and we go, God, I just can't do this anymore. And he goes, that's great, because I can, but I need you to take your hands off of it. And then through that, we gain strength. Now, here's the interesting thing about strength, okay? We are called to strength. We are called to be strong. We're not called to be weak. We recognize we're weak, but we're called to strength, and it's called to walk in the strength that Christ gives us. And Jesus said this. It's a powerful statement. He said, it's in the Beatitudes. He says, blessed are the meek, for the meek will inherit the earth. Now, meekness is not weakness. It's quite the opposite. Meekness is having real, deep, strong power, but choosing to use it in proportion to what the situation requires. It's saying, I've got a sword and I can take it out and lop off heads, but I'm gonna keep it sheathed until the right time. That's true strength. It's meekness. And what we're celebrating today, it's interesting that it fell on this Sunday that we're talking about this, is actually the ultimate act of meekness. This is Palm Sunday. This is the day where we celebrate that the King of the world, like God in the flesh, the guy who at any moment could have said, I'm done with this, wipe them all out. He came in and he's like, I'm gonna come in riding on a donkey, which is a weird scene because really, in those days, when a king was had just won a victory, he came in riding a white horse and everyone would celebrate him and put palm branches in front of him and be like, oh, king, you're so great. Jesus had so much authority, he's like, I don't need to ride a white horse. I can come in on a donkey and I've still got authority and I don't even care what you think. I'm in charge. That's ultimate power. That's ultimate strength. And here's what seems to indicate. Jesus is saying, when you walk in that kind of strength, that's the long game. You know, an inheritance is a part of you that lives on in somebody else because of something you built that's given to somebody else. When you walk in this strength, it actually shakes the next generations as they carry part of you with them. And I believe that this idea of meekness or gentleness, taking your strength, is really what wins the world in the long game. It's not your brute force. I'm a brute force guy. I'm like, I know it needs to be done. I'm just gonna go in there and blow up everything and see what happens. That's not how God works in the kingdom of God. He's like, nah, I have so much power. I can do this slowly, patiently, gently, and softly. Now, what's interesting, there's a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. We don't quote him much in church. He was the guy that said, God is dead, we killed him, right? He said something fascinating that I think it's pretty insightful. He said this, he said, I've often laughed at weaklings who thought themselves good because they had no claws. What he's saying is, you can't be good if you don't have the capacity to not do good and do really bad stuff, right? Now you have to think about this for a second. You're like, because some people are looking like, oh, it's such a good person. No, they're just weak, right? That latte sipping pansy, right? It's like, no, that guy's not good. He's out there protesting with his thing. I'm a good person. No, you're just a pansy, right? Strength, you don't have to tell anybody you're strong when you're really strong. You met people like this, they walk into a room and you're like, that dude's in charge. Ain't no doubt about it. That woman, she's got it together. Ain't no doubt about it. She walks in with a quiet, cool confidence and you're like, that lady has got it going on. We know people like this, but here's the thing. It's when you've got that strength that you don't have to show it. When you've got true strength, you don't got to tell everybody, I'm in charge. You ever had a manager like that? You're like, I'm in charge. I'm a good manager. I'm like, the louder you tell it, the more I'm convinced you aren't. I've also learned that with people that tell you they're chill. If somebody tells you they're a chill person, you better run for the hills. Oh, don't worry, I'm a chill person. And later they're like, I'm a chill person, don't upset me. When you've really got it, you don't have to announce it. And that's what real strength is. And that's what Nietzsche, he's like, these people, they think they're strong, but they're actually very weak because they don't actually have any capacity to do harm. And what we're celebrating today is Jesus coming in and saying, I got all authority. He even said that. He's like, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. He was actually going towards his death. And he walked in with a quiet confidence. Didn't have to announce himself. And there's this verse in Zechariah that prophesied what it would be like. It said, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king, the guy that's going to rule the whole world, he's coming. He's coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he. He's humble and he's mounted on a donkey. Which in the day they would go, what? Man, what does that even mean? This was prophesied way before Jesus came. Like, no, a king comes mounted on a white horse and has to announce he's got power, right? Driving his bright red Corvette on a colt, the foal of a donkey. True strength doesn't have to be announced. True strength is ultimate confidence in who you are, and it's just being able to walk in, no, I've got this, right? And when you've got that kind of strength, you can actually be gentle with others. You can dole out that strength. You can use minimum necessary force. Now, we live in a world that says the opposite of that. They're like, if you got power, use it. Just use it, whatever you need to get done, use the power to get it done. And we're seeing it increasingly. So as I was talking about this, thinking through this idea, I was like, how does this fit in with courage? And I realized, actually, it's the most courageous thing you can do, because this is one of those things that God asks you to do that ain't easy. And you have to trust that if you do it, it's gonna work out on the other side, because God promised it would work out on the other side. And as I was thinking through this, my wife shared something with me, and I was like, that is so profound, she needs to share that on Sunday morning. So I went to her and I said, woman, you need to say this. The bruise is healing nicely. I said, Emily, would you share this? And she said, absolutely not. And I was like, please, pray about it. And she said yes. So if you guys would welcome my wife up here to share for a few minutes. Yeah. All right. Please don't hit me. No, I'm just kidding.
Hello.
There we go.
I made the mistake of sharing my thoughts and feelings with Joël. I blame this on the car ride. We drive an hour and a half from here back to Kerrville, and I'm trapped in there with him. And then my words start coming out, and I share too much. I'm an overshare. Anyways, I read this verse that's in 1 Peter, and when I read it, I felt so convicted. But let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. And, I've read that part, gentle and quiet spirit. I've heard it so much. And, I probably thought, oh, that sounds nice. Isn't that sweet? Or it sounds kind of boring, honestly. I do want to point out, it doesn't say you have to be gentle and quiet. It says a gentle and quiet spirit. It's talking about an inner situation, because Lord knows we really can't be that quiet. But God's talking about letting our spirit be quiet. And when I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't had this, and I really want to get a hold of this. I've been in survival mode. I've been, having a loop of worry in my mind. It's very easy to panic. There's so much to worry about. And then when you have children, there's more to worry about. I'm worried about, are they eating enough? Are they not eating enough? Who are they hanging out with? There's just, and you can get stuck in a cycle where your mind never turns off. And then when I thought that, I said to myself, but I'm going to work on this privately, but I'm not going to tell Joël that I'm working on this, because I'm going to be in the kitchen and I'm going to lose it. And then he's going to say, how's that working out for you? Gentle and quiet spirit.
I would never do that.
You would never. I know. So I was like, not going to say it, not going to say a word. And then the last 5 minutes of the drive, I don't know what we were talking about. And I was like, blah, blah, blah. Anyways. But I thought this is also really interesting, because I think culture is kind of also craving this softness. Have you been hearing that kind of trending? I'm in my soft era. I'm going to be a woman of softness. We're changing from girl boss. We're overwhelmed and overstimulated, so we're leaning into our soft era. And I thought that's really interesting. And it's kind of like, it's more like changing your outward circumstances, though. It is getting control of your anxiety, but it's like I'm creating better boundaries for myself. But God has a lot to say about how we access, that's the world's version of, using externals to create that. And then I thought another version I heard was, I can be soft when I'm given the strength that I'm supposed to get from, in a relationship. If the man gives me the strength I need, I can be soft and I can be that vulnerable person. And that sounds really nice. That'd be great. But we're called as Christians to behave in a manner before we even get what we need, just as we forgive before we get an apology, because we have a different source. We're forgiven, therefore we forgive. And it's the same with softness or gentle and quiet spirit. We get a hold of our inner, turmoil before we're able, and give it before we receive the strength that or the needs and wants that we have. Before we even get them, we get control of our mind. And then I thought, if we can't use our brute strength, a lot of times the way we do it is we use emotional manipulation. We're just just comes so naturally, just to use our feminine wiles or our emotions. We're real sneaky to get what we want because there is a primal thing that's like, I need to get my needs met emotionally, physically, and if I can't power my way through it, I'm going to find a way to get that. But God talks about a different way to control your husband. And it's also very convicting. I didn't like it, but, let's read it. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives when they see your respectful and pure conduct. Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear. Man, but let the adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And I know some of us are hearing this and thinking, I can't do it. But don't worry, there's another side where the men are spoken to, but right now we're focusing on what are we called to do as women. And, the world talks about, kind of trying to find what you want by getting it externally, but we're called to get it internally. And how do you do that? You have to continually be in the Word. And, so much of the Bible is just filled with trust in the Lord. My God shall supply all my needs. Lean not on your own understanding. I will hide you in the shadow of my wings. He's close to the brokenhearted and the crushed in spirit. It's full of it. And you have to constantly be downloading that. Write it over and over again on your heart and soul. And when you get that downloaded, you can present inner beauty that the world is craving. You're going to have it inside of you, just coming out of the overflow. And my favorite one that's worth meditating on is be anxious for nothing, but in everything submit your requests to God, and the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your heart and mind. Can you imagine women going into a room and that's the kind of settledness you have in your soul? Imagine the impact that has in your home and on your family, and a lot of times the victory that you're looking for in your marriage and in your relationships. It reminds me of the story he was talking about with Jonathan. He went uphill to attack the enemy with one other guy. And sometimes that's what it takes. We have to step out in faith and follow, a different way of doing things in order to see victory on the other side. Amen. I was also really impacted by reading the Messages version, kind of a paraphrase of that whole passage. Cultivate inner beauty, the gentle, gracious kind that God delights in. The holy women of old were beautiful before God that way and were good, loyal wives to their husbands. Sarah, for instance, taking care of Abraham, would address him as my dear husband. You'll be true daughters of Sarah if you do the same. And this was my favorite part, unanxious and unintimidated. And I just wanted that to be my new mantra. Like when I go into a situation, if I've downloaded that peace of God that's supposed to be inside of me, I can approach any situation unanxious and unintimidated. I'm not shook by the drama unfolding around me. There's always something to worry about. I'm not shook by worrying like, am I measuring up to what other people are doing out there? It can calm the inner girl boss. We don't need to all be competing with each other. We're going to lift each other up. And so it's just a whole different shift of the way to look at things. So let's hear what God has to say to the husbands.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you. You can take it. Thank you. Yeah. What I think is beautiful about that is for about the past 40, 50 years, our culture has been saying, women, you're only going to get value if you can be just like a man. If you can keep up with him in the work world. That's not the gift that God gave you to bring to the world. God gave women the gift of gentleness, of the nurturing, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's your strength. And we've equated all strength to what men can bring, brute force. And women are trying to live up to that, and it's an impossible standard. And God's like, that's not what you're called to be. He's like, I made you to be this feminine side. God has feminine and a masculine side. It's a weird thing. Like, He's got both sides, the gentleness, but he's also got the brute force, and we're called to live in that. But here's the thing. This is where, guys, we don't get off the hook, okay? We love the verse that says, submit to your wives, submit to your husbands. But here's what it says to men. So listen up, men. Likewise, husbands, Live with your wives in an understanding way. Now, men, let's be honest. This is hard because I don't understand that woman. I don't. She's expressing something and I'm like, I want to understand. I have no idea what you're talking about here, right? There's this book called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. And what he basically says is men kind of compartmentalize everything. And we deal with this and we deal with this. Women, it's like a spaghetti. You're talking about this and then she says this and you're like, wait, what? I thought we were talking about, no, it's all connected. Just listen. And I'm like, which box are we in? She's like, it's not a box, it's all. So, but here's the beauty that they bring to the table. They understand nuance. They understand the connected thingsness of things. And men are trying to separate this and this and this. And listen, this is where he goes on. He says this, you got to make an effort to understand your wife, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel. Now listen, this does not mean they're weaker, they're less than. It just means they're not physically as strong as men. Okay? Straight up. The International Olympic Committee just judged this week. They said, hey, we can't have men who think they're women beating up in women in the boxing ring anymore. We just can't have that, okay? So it's just the nature of it. Like women on their strongest day, a man just has their muscles develop different. So it's not saying you're less than. It's actually saying they've got a different kind of value. And don't get this wrong. And here's the important thing, man. Here's what it says. Since they're heirs with you, remember we talked about the inheritance? They're part of bringing that inheritance to the generations that come. So if you're raising your kids, you need that masculine and that feminine energy. It says the grace of life so that this is super important. Listen to me. So that your prayers may not be hindered. I talk to men all the time, like, man, I don't know what happened. My business is just tanking. Numbers are dropping off. I'm losing employees. And I'm like, have you been getting input from your wife? She doesn't know business. Are you respecting your wife? Are you trying to understand her? There's a very good possibility that what you may be struggling with in another area of your life that you think is unconnected to your marriage actually has to do with your lack of respect for your wife or your unwillingness to listen to her. Because she brings a very unique, important perspective to the table that we just don't have. And if you go ignoring that, you're gonna suffer for it. Your prayers, it says, will actually be hindered. So how does this all tie together? Here's the thing. What gentleness is gonna look like for men is gonna be slightly different than what it's gonna look like for women, and that's okay. But gentleness ultimately wins the day. Having inner strength, I love this Asian proverb, it says this, be soft like water and you will overcome the hard. You ever see water just slowly eating away at rock or stone, and it's slow. It's slow. It'd be a lot easier just to go get a rock saw trencher like we use in Kerrville and just cut through the rock. But God doesn't work that way. He's like, no, I have so much strength. I can do things slowly and gently. And just little by little, you just let your gentleness be known. And it even says there, it says, women, you may even win over your unbelieving husband who you're like, this guy has no spiritual bone in his body. You go, I don't know how to convince him that this thing of Jesus is real. Listen, that's what it says. It says, if you walk in this softness, this gentleness, this honoring, you have no clue the power that comes with slowly, consistently offering what you're gifted to be. And women, it looks different than men, and that's okay. We're not called to be the exact same. So we walk in that gentleness, and then we get to what Jesus said, the meek. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. It's a lot easier. It's a lot quicker to go with brute strength. But God says, I don't work that way because I have all strength. I don't have to work that way. I don't have to show you. I can come riding in on a donkey and no strength has been lost. And men, listen, you can do the same thing. If you've got true strength, you don't have to announce it. You can be gentle. You can be understanding with your wife, and you're not going to be seen as a weak person. You know, we have this thing of toxic masculinity. Everybody's like, men, toxic masculinity. Listen to me. Men are made to be strong. They're called to be strong. They're called to be warriors who defend the weak. There's nothing wrong with that, men. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be strong. Just make sure you're not using that strength for your own self. You're using it to help others. I've heard people say, if you think strong men are dangerous, wait till you see what weak men can do. Weak men are truly dangerous. Weak men who don't have any authority, so they have to project it on the world, they're dangerous people. Think about Hitler. Weak man. That's what happens. But our strength comes from the Spirit of God living within us. And when you've got that spirit and that confidence, man, you can, like we joke, we can storm the gates of hell with a water pistol. Because you know that it's the Spirit of God that's gonna win the victory in your life. And you don't have to announce it. You don't have to be showing off to people, I'm in charge here. No, people know it. You know when you see somebody with authority, they just walk around with it. And that's what we want to be. And it's going to look different for women. Women, it comes through that gift of gentleness that they bring. But men, we're not exempt from being gentle. The gentleness is going to look different, but gentleness is ultimate strength that wins the victory. You guys receive that?